Good morning and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. I'm Richard Edwards, and today I have a new webcam, so hopefully that's working and not going in and out of focus like the one I've previously had was. All these wonderful tech things you got to do to keep up with business these days. Now, Graeme McDonald is in the middle, I believe, at the moment of selling a car. Or I believe signing up the customer, so it's even further down the track than that. So he will pop into the show hopefully later. But for now, we have, and it's not a consolation prize, it's of equal value, I believe, David Crawford, who I believe is now a fully independent person. You've done with your handover.
It's completed. The transition came to an end last week, so now I'm what they say, a mere consultant, doing odd bits of work when I feel like it.
That's David's way of saying, if you have any consulting work, throw it his way. How's your week been other than that? Your stress levels have dropped yet another notch?
They have. I'm quite relaxed. So I've got one piece of work that I'm doing at the moment, which I clarified with the sponsor, the terms of reference and the content. So I'm just sort of plugging away at that. When the mood feels, really, it's quite nice because it's a relatively generous timeline to get a shortish piece of work done. So I'm now sort of starting to switch mode and to thinking about how to run a relaxed retirement without getting bored.
Now, did you and Mrs. Crawford celebrate with a dry cherry?
We celebrated a little while ago with a nice dinner out with a very nice wine and a couple of cocktails. As she has a fancy, she's a penchant for cocktails. I don't complain. I like the odd one myself.
So does Mrs. Edwards and myself. So well done. Right, let's kick straight into the news with some interesting statistics, and that is that it was the biggest new vehicle sales month yet. Motoring Association says that June 2023 registrations of 23,560 units is the biggest new vehicle sales month yet on record, with Toyota Hilux becoming the best-selling overall vehicle for the month. It was, pretty much double what it was in June 2022, and 2,500 units higher than the previous biggest month, March 2022. Clean car policy changes the commonality here, according to MIA Chief Executive Amy Wiley. In March 2022, people rushed to register vehicles to avoid the introduction of clean car discount fees, and we can see this repeated in June 2023 to avoid increasing fees or reducing rebates from 1 July onwards. Of the 23,560 June registrations, passenger vehicles accounted for 17,299, commercial vehicles 6,261. That was the highest passenger month on record. I don't believe it was the same for commercial. Second biggest on record. So a really big month there. Big month for BEVs, PHEVs and hybrids. And obviously that big month for the Hilux. Now, that is wonderful news, but it's probably going to mean a pretty slow July, August, September. People aren't going to buy that many cars between now and the election, really, are they, David?
No, and look, there were three factors at play for those June sales, and that press release they put out touched on two of them. So unlike the previous high, we had increased low emission vehicle sales before the rebates reduced, whereas previously low emission vehicles, particularly hybrids and efficient petrol motors, sales slowed down in March last year, waiting for the rebates to come into effect. But commercials were huge because they were trying to avoid the fees. So this time we had the double impact of people buying low emission vehicles before the rebates went down. And then the others biting the bullet and saying, well, yeah, I don't like paying fees, but they're only going to get worse, so I better renew now. Combined with that, as the third factor, is that shipments that have been delayed overseas, particularly ports of Australia, had arrived. Not all of them, but quite a few had arrived. And so there were supply available to match demand. And you can see that in Kia's numbers. that reflects a huge shipment of vehicles arrived and being processed. I feel sorry for distributors. I understand Ford shipment didn't make the cut-off date, so that's sort of impacted. But yeah, that's a big sales. July, I think, will be very dry, and this is probably the last of the big months that we will see for several years. It's a huge volume, but it just goes to show how much government rule changes can affect the market. So you get these little lumpy things that come to play, and I think it'll take some months now for the market to normalise.
Yeah, and the government may be sitting there going, "Oh, that's good for the emissions and all this kind of stuff." And they're still selling cars, and sure they've done a big month now, but they're much later. That's not really how business works. You've still got wages to pay in August. You've still got people who have to either come to work, or maybe you don't need so many people, and that means job losses because you had to have all these people before this and maybe not after. They're not really thinking about the repercussions.
No, lumpiness is not good. You have a look at airlines just trying to rebuild capacity after not having flights. It's easy to lay people off, but harder to bring them back on. And in this case, processing the number of vehicles was a huge task. And Neeraj Lala went to some pains to point that out, just how big a challenge it was for their staff and their agents to do that. It's no small feat, but it's going to be quite difficult for the next few months.
So move on to the import side of the trade. Used import passenger registrations, they surged, but they fell short of records. Used import passenger vehicle sales saw a notable increase in June 2023. It couldn't surpass last year's peak. A total of 16,680 used passenger units registered, falling short of the high of over 24,000 from last month. The hybrid-focused Toyota range led the passenger car market with 5,849 units, followed by Nissan with 2,527. Mazda with 2,235, Subaru with 1,457, and Honda with 1,131. Toyota Aqua remained the most popular car, despite losing a little bit of its rebate, and a pretty tame month on the commercial side with 87. Of course, the reality is there, the rebates just aren't that different for most of the used import market. I mean, it's a few $100 there, a few $100 there. Certainly it's bigger on the on the commercial side, I guess, and on the SUV side, but it's still not the dramatic shifts that we've seen in the new car market. That's kind of, I guess, the reason behind it? Any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, and to what extent were shipping affecting supply? See, custom numbers were up, but you're right. The change in rebates or fees we're nowhere near the level of the new vehicle market. So for most used buyers, there's a little bit of a difference, but not a huge difference. So their behavioural change is not as great. The pricing signal's not anywhere near as powerful enough to drive that change, which is, I would imagine, a good outcome for the used vehicle sector because there's more consistency in terms of supply and sales.
Yeah. And if we touch on that, we do have that figure up here as well. Vehicle arrivals surge in June. A total of 27,902 vehicle imports at the wharf in June, which was up 29.4% compared to the previous month. The total number of passenger vehicles was up 25.8% month on month. And then this included 11,000 new cars and 12,959 used cars. Year to date, there have been 101,939 passenger vehicle arrivals. Truck and van imports were up 57.4% for the month. A fairly bigger month for arrivals, but not necessarily matching up with the actual registrations, which, particularly on the new car side, which does, I guess, say something in the longer term. When you've got less arriving than you have being sold, ultimately, something's going to happen in the next month, which I think we've kind of already predicted. Unsurprisingly, electric vehicles got a CCD bump. Sales of electric vehicles were strong in June. Despite the change in rebate for new vehicles only being around $1,500, the rebate for used actually rising. New battery electric vehicle registrations for the month totaled 2,627 passenger commercial over a quarter of the year-to-date tally of 9,578 units. Tesla was the top brand on 965, followed by BYD on 440, Hyundai on 310, MG on 260, Kia on 128, Ford on 99, Volkswagen on 67, Peugeot on 53, GW Aura on 44, and BMW on 42. So that's a solid month for that. But I think we're still seeing with the electric stuff, the volumes and that delivered does tend to bounce up and down depending on what ships are coming in, particularly if Tesla's got a big lump of cars coming through, whether they've changed pricing. We'll touch on later. They've just changed their pricing again, so we'll probably see a big bump up in the next 2 months. It's a bit volatile just because I think there's such a small number of models that are taking so much of the volume. It just really depends on what's landed and what's priced.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing a wider range of models entering the market, but the popular ones are still you can count on one hand. I was just thinking, Richard, in the 10 years, I started in the role with the Motor Industry Association in 2013, and the first, pre-COVID, most of the monthly arrivals through customs and registrations, they matched each other, and the level of stock held was higher than what it is now. But since COVID struck, the entire process for ordering and shipment arrivals and stock levels is still topsy-turvy. We're still getting irregular shipments. We still have long lead times for some popular models, which has been exacerbated by logistical challenges, combined still with the Clean Car discount scheme, which is driving different behaviours. So we still haven't, the last 4 years, the industry has been working to quite a different dynamic. And I just wonder how long it's going to take before it to normalise. And I think probably once the feedback goes, which it's likely to go if we get a change of, well, it will go if we get a change of government. That may change the process again, but shipping patterns are still a little bit inconsistent. And electric vehicles, the BEVs, tend to come in shipment loads. And once they arrive, if they've got back orders, it will drive that month and then look relatively slow for a little while. Tesla's always been a bit like that.
And if you take even how they've structured themselves, particularly in the Auckland area, it ties into that. So both Tesla and BYD in Auckland have literal warehouses for processing and delivery. BYD in Penrose and Tesla, they're opening. It's been running for a while. They're to officially open it in Mangere. Just massive warehouses with staff on site designed to PD cars, get them ready to go out the door and deliver them. And they do it in volume and they do it fast. We've seen before Tesla, out of essentially 2 facilities, can deliver 1,500 plus cars a month. I mean, it's unheard of that a single operation would do that. And that's how they've structured themselves. It's just a different way to tackle the industry, I think.
Well, they have an advantage too, in that they don't have many model variants. And with pure battery electric vehicles, the pre-delivery inspection to get the vehicle through compliance is simplified as well. There's less things to check. The vehicles are more homogeneous. So that provides for an efficient mechanism for getting vehicles in through the compliance process and out the door. The biggest challenge is where we can store a whole lot of vehicles while we do all of that work.
Yeah. And they've bought warehouses to do that, is the simple answer. I guess the other thing too is, imagine having to put fuel in 1,500 vehicles, having to fuel 50 vehicles a day.
Well, it's the fluids. It's not just fuel. It's the oils and the hydraulic oils and things like that. It's that's what I mean by pure battery electric vehicles. Is a simpler process.
Yeah. Whereas you take Tesla or BYD, you throw a dozen reasonably high powered AC chargers in the back of the workshop, and you can just keep pumping them through.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, the advantages. Right, moving on to our next one. And this is someone who I'm sure you've spent a lot of time with over the years, and that is Dean Sheed. Well-known Audi boss steps aside. Leet takes over. Dean Sheed, long associated with the Audi brand in New Zealand as its general manager for almost 15 years, is stepping aside. Sheed confirmed his transition to a new role within the European motor distributors, where he will oversee its branded finance and mobility operations. Over the weekend, Sheed elaborated on his move and new position in a social media post. The new role covers all our brands, their dealer networks, and key finance, insurance, and mobility partners: UDC Finance, ERL, Provident Insurance, and Six. Together, we provide benchmark mobility options at every touch point of the consumer journey, Sheed explains. He spoke glowingly about his tenure with the great German brand. After 14 years with the Four Rings, I've been fortunate to lead or attend some amazing experiences locally and globally. It's been a pleasure to help in the development of our team members, who now realise their potential and achieve success in many parts of the business. Working alongside the best dealer network and meeting countless customers has been enjoyable and always enlightening. Current Volkswagen passenger cars general manager Greg Leet will take over the Audi position. The brand is in good hands with Greg Leet taking over the reins to guide the team and develop the business. A shout out to Glenn Tulloch and Richard Giltrap for their continued support and guidance. Now, there is a second part to the story that we'll get on to a second. I don't want the person in the second part to think I'm overlooking them, but let's just touch on Dean first. He's a bit of an industry icon, I guess. I mean, he's been around for a very long time. He's not leaving, but technically, but as far as distribution goes, he's been around a very long time, and some would argue done a very good job, and also been a massive proponent of electric vehicles as well. He's been a leader with Drive Electric for some time too. Good guy to work with, David?
Yes, you always get a very good and thoughtful response from him, and I think Dean has done something similar to what I did, which was, after a period of time in a role, you begin to think, is it time for a fresh pair of eyes? What's in the organisation's best interest? Have I still got the degree of enthusiasm and motivation to keep doing the same role? He's decided that it was time to step aside after 13 or 14 years in a role, get a fresh pair of eyes, new enthusiasm. Things are changing. But also, I think his experience is huge. And EMD has decided to keep him on, which I think is also a really good thing to do. And kudos goes to Glenn Tulloch and Richard Giltrap for thinking ahead about what changes are going to come. If you start asking yourself the question, what is the new vehicle market going to look like in 5, 10, or 15 years' time? And the answer is a wider range of mobility options. And that is what electrification and automation and safety systems is inevitably leading to. So a very smart move, I think, for EMD to create a post and get ahead of that, start creating some discussion and some noise through the media, through social media, etc., around that whole mobility function. So all up, I think what they've done is quite clever.
Definitely. And it's been part of they've had quite the management shuffle, even outside of the distributor level parts of EMD lately. We saw, we've seen a few senior managers move around, and I guess Dean kind of fills a gap that was created by that, and I'm sure his expertise won't be missed. Greg Leet, of course, a very, very sharp operator, did very well with Skoda, really expanding its fleet options and developing that brand, and now moving over into Audi from Volkswagen. He, I have no doubt, will do very well there, though. I've always seen Greg as being really good at pushing volume, so be interesting to see how he goes in that Audi role. Now, the interesting move, of course, is MD appointing Chanel McDonald as the new General Motor Volkswagen passenger cars. Now, Chanel worked with Dean for a long time, of course, at Audi in a marketing role there. So she's kind of done the Dean Sheed finishing school. The Giltrap Group's distribution arm, European Motor Distributors, has appointed Chanel McDonald as its new Volkswagen passenger cars general manager effective August 1, 2023. Automedia Group believes McDonald is the first female general manager to be appointed by EMD, and the news was warmly embraced by all of her colleagues. She's working in tandem with her colleague Kevin Richards, who is the Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles general manager. McDonald told Automedia Group that she is humbled to be selected as the new general manager and is excited by the opportunity ahead, especially as the brand is heading solidly down the electrification route with the forthcoming launches of the ID vehicles. The internal promotion was announced to staff in the dealer network on June 30. And McDonald will transition from her current role as a Skoda New Zealand National Sales and Recruitment Manager, which she's held for more than 2 years, reporting to GM Rodney Gillard. Prior to taking on the Skoda role, McDonald was the former head of marketing for Audi brand for more than 2.5 years. She has an extensive background in marketing, coming to MD from Foot, Cone and Belding FCB, where she was a senior account director. So good to see Chanel coming into. I didn't actually show the story. I'll put that back up. Coming into that role. Good to see some female leadership coming through there at European motor distributors. And I think I kind of always thought that this was where she was heading when she shifted from very traditional marketing roles into a sales role, which was an interesting move at Skoda. Of course, doing that through the time that the police contract came in. So I wonder if she's perhaps being rewarded a little bit for her work on that rather famous case. Have you done much with Chanel before, David?
No, I haven't. But what this reshuffle with an EMD shows is that they have a really good staff development program, and there's a career path up through the organisation. So I think that is admirable in this day and age. And I think it's, if they're up to the job, it's a really efficient way of keeping your talent and motivating them and getting the results. And you build that career opportunity within a wider distributorship. You've got that talent pool that you can bring through. So good on them. And it's good to see a woman in senior management. They have... she has done a good job from what I understand, but no, I haven't personally met her, but I've been aware of her in other things.
I think it's going to be an interesting time for Volkswagen, and certainly I think she's almost got a little bit of rebuilding to do, and this is not to criticise the work of Greg before. He did a very good job at Volkswagen, but he also did a very good job at Skoda and Audi heading down, reaching down a little with some of its smaller vehicles, and Skoda kind of becoming a more volume brand. It's kind of stolen Volkswagen's old march. And I think with ID and a few other things going on, they really need to kind of find a new home, a new voice for the Volkswagen brand here. So that's good to have some new, fresh blood to do that, I guess.
Well, if the market becomes more challenging, which I expect it will do, given the economic direction that we're in at the moment, then somebody with a good sales and marketing background would be good in this, because it will come down to how the whole brand is viewed to drive that demand side.
Yeah. Now, speaking of new appointments, someone's arrived into the waiting room. Welcome, Graeme McDonald. You sold
Good
the car?
morning. Yeah, sales superstar here.
Was it
also,
no,
it wasn't actually. No, just a surprise. But I'm chief
hybrid fielder.
Second guess, right? I'm the chief cook, bottle washer, everything. I think pretty much last man standing here at the Croydon Empire this morning. We've been beset this week by staff leave, staff sickness, staff everything. I don't know. I think everyone needs a big jar of ointment right now, to be fair. So I'm the last man standing. Glenn's come in for a couple of hours to just watch the phones and go home and nurse his back, and then and that's it. So it's all on here. So I had to sell a car first.
Well, you missed the market discussion. How was the month for Croydon's?
It wasn't too bad. It was one of those months that was a bit of a stealth sales month, though. You didn't feel like you were really busy at any particular point in time. It just chugged away. And when you add up the numbers at the end of it, you think, yeah, that wasn't too bad. I think conversely, the start to July, though, with the holidays, the onset of the school holidays, and let's be honest, the horrific weather in Auckland did sales no favours. But it seems to have picked itself back up again. So
let's face it, July's going to be pants, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tough one with the school holidays. It always is. But again, the biggest issue is having stock. And if you've got stock right now, as long as it's the right sort of stock, I think you'll probably be safe to say you'll sell it. It's the big issue everyone has, just haven't got the right cars on the ground at the right time. And we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. Right, well, let's carry on with the news. We're kind of about 2/3 of the way through, and we're still in... You can probably switch off a bit, Graeme. We're still in new car industry appointments, so...
Okay.
But another really positive one. Mitsubishi Motors New Zealand appoints new head of retail sales and operations. Mitsubishi Motors New Zealand has promoted Hayley Rowland-White into the newly created role of head of retail sales and operations. President Warren Brown says the role was created to evolve and strengthen the team as the brand enters an exciting new period. I'm thrilled to give Hayley the scope and responsibility of leading vehicle sales for Mitsubishi Motors New Zealand as we begin this new phase of our operations. She's again someone who's worked up through the business, started out in the customer care centre. That's really good to see another appointment there. Interesting period for Mitsubishi Motors New Zealand. People will know that Dan Cook, of course, departed early this year. My people through the chain have said that there's been a little bit of a culture change within Mitsubishi since that. He's quite a big character to lose, not necessarily in a bad way. So good to see that they're making some progress there.
Well, I've worked with Hayley in some of her previous roles, and she's a good operator, and I'm delighted that she's been promoted, and good on them, and I wish her all the best.
Yes, definitely. I'm hoping to get down there soon to have a little play with their mini electric car. Yeah, a New Zealand brand getting into K car size electric cars. I think that's a bit of fun.
You mean like the IMEV, Richard, that's been around since about 2010? Nothing new.
And Mitsubishi sold that, no, but they're getting back into it with this EK, which is a cool little box car. I think could be fun. Certainly from a fleet side, I think could be a great fleet car. But we'll see once I drive it.
I had a look at that car at the field days.
Lots of interior volume on it, isn't it?
It's not as small as I thought it would be. I think it's probably a relatively practical car that could fit a niche here.
Yeah, I certainly think people who just want to.
I was going to say, the little secret about K-Class cars, David, is if you haven't played with them before, they are the veritable TARDIS of the motoring world. And they're built to size in Japan. You open the door, you think, this isn't too bad. They're masters at making great use of interior space, and Kiwis haven't really been exposed to that up to now. There's been a few K-Class smatterings here and there, but if we see more of them here, I think there's a real opportunity in the market, I think, for the smaller K-Class, similar box-style cars where Kiwis realise there's a whole lot more room in them than they actually thought.
Well, I mean, we, of course, did the wrap from a Hustler.
We did, yep. I'd actually like to see the Nissan Sakura make an entry into the marketplace here.
Well, that's the same car as the Mitsubishi EK. It's the same car with a different face on it.
They're not free from issues, and a number of new vehicle distributors are looking at that class of vehicle, because a lot of them now will have got the safety assist systems in them, but the issue really is their top speed and whether the suitability for all of the road classes. And there's a real issue if a vehicle can only go 70 to 80 Ks, and you got them on 110 K motorway, that's fine because you've got a passing lane, but in other parts of the road, that's not the case. And I think that's the issue, is their suitability for a wider range. So in New Zealand, they won't be used primarily in an urban environment.
David, I don't know of any K-Class vehicles that do maximum. Well, I mean, maybe there is, but I never experienced.
No, I think there's some confusion here. Look, the EK will do road speeds. That thing will probably have like 110, 100 k an hour, 120 k an hour top speed. But there are distributors looking at some of the quadricycle size stuff at the moment too. Toward New Zealand one is definitely looking into that space, and that does become the problem because I think the car they're talking about has literally 60 k an hour top speed.
I can tell you the number of K-Class cars are not capable of going 100 kilometres an hour. So that is the issue. And I feel particularly strongly about this because way back in a previous life, you might recall. In motorbike license, the provisional, you were limited to a 70k speed. And when I was a general manager at the Ministry of Transport, that was the first thing I got rid of. Why did I push so hard to get rid of it from a regulatory perspective? Because it was creating a differential speed in an open road case, which was less safe than the lower speed for the rider. So it's really looking at the suitability of the vehicles in the New Zealand context. And I've always been very consistent that that's what we need to look at. If they can do the road speed, bring them in. That'll be my view.
Yeah, just 130 k an hour the Mitsubishi EK can do.
Yeah, well, that's
Sakura. Yeah.
David, I've got a Suzuki Carry truck on my farm, a 2010 model Suzuki Carry that we've converted by the Impact people down in Hamilton to an off-road four-wheel drive farm truck. And I can tell you right now, even on the big farm Bicky tyres that it's got, we're going to take it into Waiuki for servicing, slap the old D plate on the back, and away I go. We can get 100 out of that little puppy, no problems at all. That's probably good for about 115.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to though.
People I know, David. People I know, Richard.
Hey, look, at least we're not talking about certain dealers in the Waikato suggesting that people could drive water-damaged Teslas on dealer plates. But that's a whole different issue. Anyway. Right. Now, we have another new brand coming to the market. It seems we've had a lot of those lately. And that is GWM Haval has confirmed finally that they're bringing in the Tank brand. Look at that thing. Whoa. How's that? Come on, Graeme. That's a bit of cool. Are you saying it's
a cool photo or it's a cool vehicle?
Yes.
GWM Haval Australia and New Zealand has confirmed the initial local deliveries of the Tank 300 hybrid 4x4 SUV will begin in the fourth quarter of 2023, and dealers taking out orders now. Pricing starts at $56,990 for the Tank 300 Lux Hybrid and from $61,990 for the Tank 300 Ultra Hybrid plus on-road costs. It's a hybrid, but it's still 218 grams of CO2, so a $4,485 fee is payable. 2-liter turbo hybrid powertrain with a 9-speed automatic. So it's it's a powerful wee beast. 2.5 ton towing capacity. That's an interesting little thing. So it is car based, but it kind of, I think, pitches itself as a Wrangler competitor. Though with the initial reviews out of Australia is that it is actually pretty darn good off road, but probably quite a bit better on road than some of the American competition in that space. Quite a quirky Hummery style Jeep look to it. Kind of echoes back to some of the older Chinese military vehicles, which I think are pretty cool. Where is it? 224 mils ground clearance, 33 approach angle, 34 departure angle, torque on demand, 4-wheel drive. Interesting vehicle.
So what's it going to pinch market share off? Because you mentioned American vehicles. Let's be honest, no buyer of a new Chevrolet Silverado said, I think, well, I don't really want the Silverado anymore. I think I'm going to get a Tank. But where is it pitched, do you think, to pinch market share? Because it's going to be pinching market share off somebody, right?
Yeah, so I suspect potentially Prado, a little bit of Wrangler market share. More. I suspect people that might be buying some utes at the moment, it could be an interesting option for them. More
the LDV ute, SsangYong ute. That's so that I don't mean to be derogatory when I say the second tier of utes, but yeah, your SsangYong LDV category, we're more price conscious, perhaps.
Yep, a Ford Everest is now is like a $90,000 plus operation by the time you option it up. That could be a thing there. Potentially, the fact that it's a hybrid, but a serious 4x4 could mean that could be some fleet business.
I think the main market though might be those people who want a Prado or an Everest or some of the other more expensive vehicles but can't afford to buy it new, so they buy a one-owner vehicle. Might take a good look at this. It won't be a large market share. They don't need a large market share, but if they can cut a niche out, and I think there will be a niche for a vehicle like this, then all power to them.
This is not the car I think they're going to do business with that much. They'll do it because it's quirky, it's interesting, so on and so forth. The one I think they will do business with is the Tank 500, which is basically some tracing paper over a Land Cruiser with a 3-liter turbocharged hybrid V6. Again, some fairly serious off-road credentials, not necessarily in the Land Cruiser realm, but some pretty solid credentials behind it. And I imagine it'll be significantly cheaper. And of course, you better get one because the queue for a Land Cruiser at the moment is, I'm not even sure if you could order one at the moment. And if they can offer something in that space that is a value offering, I guess, and they can actually supply it, then that certainly could have a bit of a possibility out there. I'll see if I can pull up a.
No, I still think you're confusing the reason why people buy Land Cruisers. And I could be wrong here, of course, but your average Land Cruiser buyer is not going to consider a tank. They're buying a Land Cruiser and waiting there 4 years or 5 years, or however long your ruler is, for reasons other than the fact that it's available now.
I know, but someone
other people might buy the tank.
Yep, domestic Chinese market could.
That's not a bad looking bit of artwork there, is it?
No. That's not a concept. That is actually what the real vehicle looks like. And 3-liter twin turbo hybrid. There's worse ways to put the boat in the water, I guess. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd certainly know. Look, we're a bit irrelevant. These cars are going to sell like hotcakes in Australia. That's probably more what they're interested in, going down that track. So yeah. Now they've actually made some other changes to their range. They've done a big price cut kind of across the board. They've cut the price of their hybrids down, and they've also cut the price down on the GWM Aura electric car, because basically we've seen MG4, Dolphin, all these things, the prices on those electric hatchbacks have just dived in recent weeks because of new models coming in, people trying to buy a market essentially, particularly MG, and they've had to cut the price there to be competitive. So been a really interesting time for that segment of the market. And if we go just quickly through some safety rating news too, we've seen a whole pile of safety ratings come through on electric and EV vehicles. So 5 stars for the Genesis GV70 and Genesis G80, which aren't sold here, but there certainly seems to be a few rolling around. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Ford Mustang Mach-E, GW Haval Jolyon hybrid vehicles. So yeah, good to see the Mustang Mach-E has that 5-star behind it now too. Just saying.
No bite, Richard. No bite.
Now this one, just a little bit of a reminder, I guess. On July 20 in the morning, there is going to be a VIA webinar in regards to clean car stuff. But that is the more important aspect. Is that's the same day as the AGM, which will certainly be interesting for the used car industry, seeing as it marks kind of the nearing the end for David Vinson's tenure. It's interesting to see they've advertised the role of chief executive again. You can see their advertisement on autotalk.co.nz. I reckon they've not appointed someone because they advertised somewhere other than AutoTalk, i.e. in the general media, and now they've realised that really they should be advertising with AutoTalk to appoint such a role. You're not tempted to put your hand up, David, or Graeme for that matter. You've got background in this area.
It's a tough role, and David, you can probably I'll speak for you for a second, and I'm sure you'll put your 10 chips in. But a really tough role in today's marketplace, in today's regulatory environment going forward. There are so many moving parts that weren't there. When David took the role on back in 2003 or 2002, let's just say there were simpler times, and I think there are so many components now that the puzzle actually requires for a role of that caliber. It will be tough to find the right person, and there probably will have to be compromises from the association's perspective. And I cannot speak for the association, right? They're really clear. But I imagine there'll have to be compromises around what the fit's going to be, whether it's monetary, whether it's location, whether it's experience, whether it's government versus industry experience. I don't know, but what the perfect candidate may or may not be, which piece of the puzzle you have to carve out to make them work, I'm not too sure. But a really challenging role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, the key issue for associations like the Motor Trade Association via MIA is the ability to be able to do that interface between the commercial side of its members and the government regulatory policy side of what impacts the business. And it is complex. So I think probably in the CEO role for VIA, they probably need somebody who's got a really good understanding of how the wheels of government works and how you can influence those. But also have a love for vehicles and have a really good understanding of how the sector works and what opportunities lie ahead. It is a tough role, and no, I'm not interested either, because I'm not interested in full-time work anymore. So, and having spent 10 years bashing my head against the brick wall from the new vehicle sector, I'm not about to jump into the used vehicle sector and do the same thing, because I left MIA not because I didn't like MIA. I really loved that job. It was the best job of my career. It's just damn hard work, and you can only take so much of it before you think, I just don't have that enthusiasm anymore. So somebody who's in their 40s or early 50s, who's still got a bit of drive left in their career, a bit of motivation, a bit of enthusiasm, would do well. But you're right, Graeme, it's not easy. It's a fun job, though. It really is, and it's that industry interaction and working with officials is a really quite an odd mix, but quite an exciting one when you get it right.
Now on to another one, which is a bit of it's a very new car heavy day today. I'm sorry, Graeme. It's just one of those weeks. And this is another one of a story behind the story. Opel's fuel price hike buster. So Opel has basically put out a promotion this week where they are offering everyone who buys their cars fuel for a year in MTA vouchers, basically. And this follows on from a promotion where they'd been doubling the clean car subsidy on electric vehicles, which I think they've been doing some of the other auto distributor brands as well. But question for you guys, and you'll have thoughts from different sides of the market, is that auto distributors, when they took on the Opel brand and they've launched it, did they call it wrong? Is there demand for that brand in the market? 'Cause we've seen so many promotions from them, and it's all been marketed as about, the fuel prices are rising or the subsidies going down, we'll, add some on, blah, blah, blah. But is the fundamental issue with Opel just that people just aren't that interested?
I was going to say, you've stolen my thunder there. I'm going to say the cynic in me would say the minute that I see promotions like that on a relatively new brand, it tells me that the salesman has just walked into the boys and said, just do whatever you do to shift some tin. We're not shifting enough of it. What have you got to do to make it work? Because it seems odd to have promotions like that with a new brand. You'd expect to have the initial rush of enthusiasm and cars stockpiled and customers working in. So, and I've yet to see, in fact, I don't actually think I have seen one Opel on the road thus far. I know it's a new brand, but I do get out there on the road on a regular basis in Auckland. Has there been the impact, apart from the initial registration of a combination of demonstrators, the odd fleet sale, what sort of impact have they actually had? And the problem that Opel has also is the name is not exactly a hallowed one from time past in New Zealand. Let's be honest, the history of the brand, particularly in the later stages, was not necessarily a good one with customer expectation versus reality. And I wonder if that's had a bit of a tarnish on it going forward in a really crowded marketplace.
The interesting thing with those brands is that they basically, you've got three brands there with the same cars with different dresses on. You've got Peugeot, Citroen, and Opel. And to a lesser extent, we're going to see a little bit of this too with Jeep in some models over the next little bit, and Alpha to an extent a little bit as well over the next little bit. But essentially, you've got to choose between three brands for the same car. And in New Zealand, if you want, the Peugeot and Citroen have Peugeot and Citroen buyers. They're quite distinctive markets. They're people who love the Peugeot brand, they want a Peugeot. They love the quirkiness of Citroen, they want a Citroen. I'm not really sure there's necessarily an Opel person. David, have you seem like you've got some thoughts on this?
I'm going to put a different perspective on this. I'm not surprised to see it, and I expect to see some other distributors maybe doing some of this going forward, because I think the new vehicle market's about to get very tough and very slow. So there's that element to it, and I think they've just sort of jumped in. But the interesting thinking behind this is they're trying to do a fee-bait scheme for a non-fee-bait vehicle, in that sense that they're saying, well, here's the rebate has really incentivized the uptake of low emission vehicles. Why don't we do something similar to see whether it shifts non-low emission vehicles? and Kiwis love a deal. So I think there's a bit of interesting marketing strategy going on here. But you're right, Opel brand is not as widely known as others. It hasn't been squeaky clean in years gone past, and so it's going to be quite a challenge to bring the brand in. But in Europe, it's got quite a good reputation. It's a different sort of vehicle. So it's the bones of the modern Opel is really good, but it's going to take some clever marketing to get the units out there and generate some buyer loyalty. So good on them, but interesting mover.
Their launch pitch was very much around every vehicle in the range got a rebate, and I suspect that's possibly not the case anymore, and that's also part of it as well, is that their old pitch is kind of dead. One of the areas I thought maybe they might have an angle in is previous Holden owners, because there's a lot of people that will buy the same car time after time because they have commonality of controls, commonality of feel, and the Opel cars still have that. If I jump into I've got my mother-in-law's Astra here at the moment, and I jump in that, and then I jump in a Opel, it's the same headlight switch still, it's the same indicator stalk still, it's very similar steering wheel and so forth. I know it's a Korean product versus the European product, but there's still GM commonality parts bin items on those vehicles, and I thought that may have played a part, but we haven't really seen that pitched. If I went and popped the mother-in-law from that into an Opel Astra, she'd probably feel quite an Opel, not an Astra, probably into an Opel, the small one, the little baby one, she'd probably feel quite comfortable. She wouldn't have much to learn, but I haven't really seen how they can market that or what they've been doing around that. So, yeah, interesting to see. Right, let's jump on to a little bit of international news, and that is tributes flow for vehicle designer. Geely Holdings, Ford and other automotive companies and representatives are paying tribute to designer Peter Horbury, who died aged 73 while traveling in China. Horbury was the company's former design executive vice president, and as Lotus Design senior vice president, was overseeing a range of EVs like the Lotus Electre SUV. During 50 years in the automotive industry, Horbury was involved in London taxi electrification, motorcycles like Triumph, buses, vans, and he helped transform Volvo's boxy 1970s and 1980s design. He worked for a variety of automotive names, including Ford, Chrysler, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Link & Co. Among those honouring Horbury are Ford's chief executive Jim Farley, former Aston Martin chief executive Andy Palmer, and Geely Holdings founder and chairman Eric Lee. If you look, Horbury basically set the tone and the look of modern Ford cars, as well as modern Volvo cars and a whole pile of other vehicles out there. I think he was responsible for the Mondeo. Was it just or the second generation Mondeo, perhaps? A really influential designer out there who's done some fantastic work. Have you guys got any favourite Horbury designs?
I haven't. Not saying there's nothing wrong with the design either, but I never sort of thought about it that way. I do have some favourite designs from other designers, but just I haven't given any thought to that. David?
I've always been quite partial to his Lotus designs, but I can never really fit into them.
I always found it interesting that, of course, he worked on Aston Martin, Volvo, and Ford at the same time when they were all in the same group. And if you look, he took the grille from Aston Martin and carried it all the way through Volvo and then to Ford, a little bit to Volvo, but then mostly to Ford. And if you look at the current Ford Fiesta, right down to that level in the brand, the Ford Fiesta has the same grille as an Aston Martin, which I find rather interesting. Really, it's yeah.
So was he responsible for the Aston Martin Signet then? Because that's got that grille.
That would have been, whether he directly did it, I don't know. But he is partially he was responsible for the kind of humpy shaped Volvos. Some of the Mondeo, the Focus, the modern ones, a whole pile of other vehicles. The Volvo 480. That's an interesting one. yeah.
I always find it. I'm not a fan of taking design features from exotic cars and then mainstreaming them in mainstream cars. I think that sort of devalues the exotic cars to a certain extent. So I'm always a little bit disappointed when I see that. But he certainly was a very, very gifted designer. There's no doubt about that, and huge influence on the industry.
Well, here's one you will like, Graeme. He's responsible for the modern Ford F-150. So
Okay.
the Mark 12 onwards, so that 2009 shift where it kind of shifted to that very
Yes.
modern look, and that's kind of
Yep,
carried on
yep.
since. That was his work. So yeah,
And that worked out just fine for Ford, didn't it?
they may have sold a few of those. Yes, they may have sold a few of those. Now, the industry seems to be working to prove Labour right at some point. The new Nissan and Navara and Patrol to be solid-state BEVs. Nissan says its next ute and heavy SUV will be battery electric vehicles. The next generation Nissan Navara appears set to skip hybrid technology and go fully electric as part of the Japanese automotive manufacturer's plan to introduce 27 electrified vehicles, including 19 EVs by 2023. That would include the new Y63 Nissan Patrol, with Nissan aiming to fast-track adoption of new solid-state battery technology. So the next Navara will have an electric option with a
So
solid-state battery.
did you say by 2023 or was that 2033?
No, so they're saying by 2030 they will have 27 electrified vehicles. So they're saying the next generation Nissan Navara. That means we'll see an electric Navara within the next 24 months.
Or maybe the solid state battery technology is one that I have mentioned on several times to the previous Minister of Transport through the EV Leadership Group as technology that is coming. It probably won't be mainstreamed until late 24, 2025. That was always going to be the window when they could scale up the technology. The issue with the solid state battery is ensuring there's a degree of what we call frangibility to it. It's a brittle structure, and being able to get it to be able to absorb the shocks and the stress of being in a vehicle has been the issue, and they managed to achieve it, but now they're scaling it up. Initially, it's not going to be a cheap option, so that the vehicle price is going to be rather interesting. But it is a technology that resolves a whole lot of issues. No longer need to be cooled, it's more stable, it doesn't burn like the lithium ion, it can charge so much more quickly, and its energy density is quite a bit higher. So the battery size can be smaller for a much greater distance. And its applicability into light commercial vehicles is very promising. So I'm pleased to see that somebody's biting the bullet. I think Ford made some comment about solid state batteries late last year or earlier this year, and I know that they're looking to bring it to the market as well.
It ain't going to be cheap. Anyway. Now, on a case of the least you could do, the MTA offers $50 voucher for revoked warrant of fitness to Newmarket Auto repair customers. The Motor Trade Association says it will support vehicle owners who recently had their warrant of fitnesses revoked by Waikatai after an investigation revealed they weren't issued by a certified inspector. Waikatai has notified MTA that 677 warrants issued over the last 10 months by Newmarket Auto Repairs, an MTA member, have been revoked with effect from July 7. MTA Chief Executive Lee Marshall says Newmarket Auto Repairs membership has been immediately suspended while a full investigation is carried out into the serious breach. For more than 100 years, MTA has stood for integrity, safety and professionalism. We take that very seriously, Marshall says. To say we're extremely disappointed would be an understatement. Our first concern is for people who have been disadvantaged and inconvenienced. Waikatai wrote to the affected vehicle owners last week to inform them that their vehicles would need to be retested. Now MTA is taking action to ensure they aren't out of pocket. Although the responsibility lies with Newmarket Auto Repairs, MTA will issue on an ex gratia basis a $50 MTA voucher to all affected customers who are unsuccessful in getting reimbursement directly from the business. $50 is the amount the Newmarket Auto Repairs advertised for a warrant. Customers can use the voucher at any MTA member business. Now, I have some hot takes on this one. Are you ready?
Far away.
If you're going to let people use your name, you got to fucking check they get the paperwork right. And I'm going to extend this to the MTA, the AA, several other organisations out there that like to slap their brands on things. Make sure they're doing it right. And I think that a $50 voucher is a little bit of a legal weasel out because people trusted the MTA brand, I think is the point. There's not that many places you can get a warrant for $50 anymore.
Yeah.
And
could that have been a bit of a red light, do you think? A little red flashing light in the background saying a $50 warrant? I mean,
with new market rents, yeah. It seems a little bit weak. Good on them for backing it, I think, and good on them for stepping in when they suggest, this is ex gratia and they're not really liable. But you guys put your name on it, and people went there because you had your name. Or some people would have gone there because the name was on it.
I'm going to say something really unpopular now and say that for a lot of these brands, I'm not necessarily aligning this with any particular brand we're talking about or others in the marketplace, but it's a pay for brand. And we're in the trade here. If we don't know that already, it's a pay for brand. What sort of checks and balances go into it once the check's written out, either on an annual basis or a per car basis? I don't know, but I've always felt a little bit like you're paying money up front to get the brand, not necessarily the backing. And
David, are we wrong?
Say that I'll come to the second point, and you can reply to that one too, David. So when it came to these warrant of fitness inspections, and now I'm not trying to extend an olive branch to Newmarket Auto Repairs, but has anyone established whether the caliber of the warrant of fitness inspection that took place was any less than if a certified inspector had done the job in the first place? In other words, was the person that was doing the job, the only thing missing was the certificate on the wall that said, I'm certified to conduct a warrant of fitness, versus the person that knew what to do, knew what to check, and checked the vehicle. So were there safety breaches identified, physical breaches identified, or is it the theory that there could have been?
Okay, let's not forget, Graeme, that 2 years ago we had people die because of inadequate vehicle inspections.
But hence the reason.
So I can understand the sensitivity by Wakakatai. David, go.
Well, dealing with the first issue, you're right. It's a paper brand, and the Motor Trade Association had put its name on it. So for them, this is important because they like to think that they're a reliable brand, and this is damage control. Excuse me a sec. So the $50 voucher ex gratia is a nice, welcome initiative. If I was an affected vehicle owner, I would expect that. But it's damage control and brand protection. So they're kind of forced into it. The second question, Graeme, was when I was reading the story this week, my very first question was exactly that. What is the material issue here? The material issue is a threat rather than reality. So I didn't read that there were any, the standard of the warrant was any less. But from a regulatory perspective, and because I've worked in a regulatory environment, the issue is that while these ones might have been okay, if you let that slide and then other people do it, then you've got a real problem because you can't guarantee the standard. So the regulatory inspector, that paper on the wall, is the bit that keeps the system honest. And so you have to penalise them if they're not being honest, irrespective of whether the quality of the work is actually there. And in the letter of the law, if they're not issued by a certified person, then the warrant has no legal standing, so it becomes more of a legal issue. So I think the agency has acted responsibly in nipping it in the bud. But come back to that very first point. So who's doing the auditing here? So the agency does the auditing to ensure the standards are kept up to scratch and that you are certified. But if the MTA is putting their brand on a workshop and you're an MTA member, what are they doing to audit the things that keeps that brand image as squeaky clean as possible? And I don't know the answer to that one.
Do you have any idea what it costs to be a member of the MTA, Graeme?
Actually, no, I don't anymore. No, we haven't looked at membership of any sort of trade organisations for quite some time now. I don't. I'm gonna put it out there and say a couple of thousand, $2,000 or $3,000 as an annual buy-in. But then there'll be schemes around when it comes to dealerships, for example, on a per unit basis, or it could be based on turnover. I just don't know. but you've got to pay something to have the blue oval on the wall.
I don't know the answer to that one either, but I do know my local garage is a member of the MTA, and occasionally I have chats to them about, what does that mean in practice. So from a workshop perspective, a garage repair workshop, there are a lot of systems and support they have in place that benefits them. So there is a question around that value trade-off. But the other thing that gives them why they are a member is the MTA brand is still a trusted brand in the minds of New Zealand consumers. And that's what we're worrying the Motor Trade Association in this one, is that their trusted brand is losing some face value. So damage control means you got to do something that's perceived as recompense for that.
Yeah. So yeah, they've done something there, but it's I guess we can. I'll acknowledge your position there, David. Maybe it was a bit harsh, but yeah. Just see if the business is still operating.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough. Carry on, David.
I'm not totally disagreeing with you, Richard. I just sort of put in more of a pragmatic frame around it.
Yeah, exactly. Right, now let's move on to the next story. And this is another one where we've had these before, where the terminology of what the heck is a trader or a dealer starts to come into play a little bit. District Court case pending over repossessed McLaren 650S Spider. A man who purchased a McLaren for $215,000 from a dealer, I'm going to put quotes dealer, which was then repossessed 7 months later for finance owing from a previous owner, is now making a civil claim against both the dealer and the financier in the District Court. The case highlights that prospective buyers should check the personal property security register before buying a motor vehicle, and that registered motor vehicle traders are obligated to disclose any outstanding financial securities on a vehicle they are selling. Yitong Chen purchased the McLaren 650S Spider from dealer Bin Gu in May 2021 and was not aware of any security interest in the vehicle. Falcon Advances repossessed the car 7 months later due to an outstanding loan on the vehicle. Chen alleges Gu failed to disclose the outstanding financial security held against the vehicle when he purchased it. The motor vehicle disputes owner told the Herald that Chen's claim raised issues that did fall within its jurisdiction, as the Consumer Guarantees Act 1993 provides a guarantee that goods are free from any undisclosed security. However, the value of the vehicle exceeded the motor vehicle disputes from a cap of $100,000 unless both parties agree to waive it. Gu refused to do so, and hence Chen is pursuing a claim against him in Falcon Advances in District Court to be heard in September. So I guess the real issue here is the $100,000 limit on the motor vehicle disputes tribunal still relevant these days when your average Ford Ranger with a couple of accessories on it's knocking up against $100,000?
Probably not. Probably no. I think a $100,000 limit these days would not see you covered for a lot of different vehicles that are sold, both new and used for that matter. Now, can I just get you to check for a second, Richard? Were you inferring in the story that the seller of the vehicle is not a registered trader, or they are?
I believe they may be, and I'm going to slap my journalist for not clarifying this in the story. You just talk amongst yourself, and I'm just going to do a little bit of digging on this while we sit here. Well,
this might be a somewhat, say, not quite politically incorrect statement to make in this particular show, but within the motor trade, in the higher flying circles of finance and motor vehicles and luxury motor vehicles, there's an awful lot of what appear to be murky stuff going on in the background when it comes to money, and I'm going to use the words money laundering, and transactions that are occurring under the tables at casinos and things like that, where vehicles are simply a asset being transferred around. We've seen these stories before. Now, for dealers like us, we work in the sort of the murky old bottom of the pit where it's just everyday vehicles, sub $20,000, $30,000. But once you get into the rarefied atmosphere of $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, it seems that the transactions fast and loose would be a term I use, particularly amongst, how should I say it, communities and others in New Zealand that are not necessarily with money that has originated in New Zealand to start with. The cars become a transactional asset and a carrier of funds. And then it becomes very murky indeed to establish what the vehicle actually was in the first place. In a material sense, was it just simply a asset to transfer funds? Was it money laundering? What was it? And that's a murky, murky world.
Certainly for the second and sale and second, third, and fourth sales of the cars, the first time registration is through through franchise dealers. That tends to be pretty safe. It's when you're trading that vehicle it becomes an asset. I don't have any comments on this one. I don't understand the issues at play. But people with money and exotic cars tend to have a different way of viewing the world.
So I have got to a little bit. What is it? The Bingu was a trader, though their trade, their registration for both themselves and the dealership expired earlier this year, or the dealership actually expired in 2020.
Of course it did.
Yeah. I get the feeling it's a dealer that has a trader that was trading, but not necessarily a dealer, if that makes sense. I think the term dealer and trader are, I believe, terms that can't necessarily always be used interchangeably. You can be a legal trader but not be a dealer, as far as I'm concerned.
As far as the law is concerned, broker. You're forgetting the word that we should be talking about, broker. In that sector, we see far more transactions where they become merely a broker between parties, or that's how it's viewed, and that sort of skirts a bit around the issue of who owns it and who's actually selling it. They're just a facilitator for it, what they'd like to see.
Yes.
It does have the hallmarks of clipping the ticket without doing your homework about the risk of clipping that ticket.
Yep,
that's right. Now, last story for the day, and again, one that might be a little bit controversial. It goes back to what we started at the end. Tesla has cut their prices yet again. We've discussed this story before. Tesla has changed the pricing on their New Zealand range today, taking it to the lowest level ever. The price of a standard range Model 3 is now just $62,500 before on-road costs, making the drive-away price $64,587. Net of the rebate, $57,572. Similar cuts for the Model Y. And that's great. EVs are getting cheaper, except for the fact that every time I hear this, I hear the leasing department of pretty much every company sitting around the Mount Wellington area just screaming that their residuals have just been ruined. and poor customers on Facebook trying to sell their Model 3s getting a dozen comments just saying, you can't sell it for that price. It's now cheaper to buy a new one.
That's actually a really valid problem going forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking from my perspective as a trader, we've yet to trade a Tesla. We're trading Leafs, and it's a different story altogether about trading Leafs right now, but yet to trade one. But I'm going to be absolutely brutal on the thing when it rolls in to trade it, because I honestly couldn't predict what it's going to be worth in a year's time, 6 months time, let alone a month after I traded it, if the value of the new product keeps on coming down. So if I'm in that position commercially, imagine the poor old muggins that's got this thing that bought it a year ago, wanted to offload it to buy another one, or do something else, or travel overseas, or whatever the Facebook phrase of the day is. How do you keep up? How do you keep up with what it's worth?
Yeah. Not helped, as we said before, in that Tesla themselves at times were putting used vehicles online at pretty horrendously cheap rates. We famously had the kind of $39,990 used Model 3s.
Now, what makes it worse is, what if you're a finance company?
Yeah, and I think
how do you put that into the transaction value now?
Yeah, and from a new vehicle buyer perspective, you say, well, do I just wait? Is it going to come down again? But if I've just bought a vehicle, I'm going to go, damn, I have to hold on to this a bit longer now. It's residual value's gone down. But I think when you the comments made by Amy Wiley about why this is happening from a new vehicle perspective, I think are at play here. So Tesla being a new market, their major buyer pool is first-time purchasers. Whereas you have a look at Mercedes, BMW, all the Ford, etc., all the other brands, they have most of their buyers are existing owners who want to keep buying into the brand. And Tesla's now moving into that mix. It's a maturing cycle. and they're having a problem. The manufacturing's generating supply, but the demand in parts of the world keep going down. They're reaching scales of economy. Other brands are discounting. It's a vicious world out there, and I don't think we've seen the last of price cuts for EVs. This is where officials thought we might have been 2 or 3 years ago, in terms of EVs becoming more affordable, or what they call price parity. We're nowhere near price parity, but I think we're starting to see the bow wave of affordability starting to manifest itself. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all of this plays out. Of course, all it takes is a brand new technology for batteries like solid state, and then you're back to that R&D cycle of trying to recover all of those costs again.
Yeah. As we said at the start, there's certainly some price competitiveness going on at the other, further down the market, driven by MG rather than Tesla. But I'm not quite sure it has the. Yeah, MG is driving it. BYD's kind of been sticking pretty hard to their prices. In fact, there's been a lot of discussion, and I am probably one of the people who agree with them, that the BYD's been overpricing elements of its range a little bit. But MG with their, I think they surprised a lot of people with the pricing of the MG4. Essentially you're talking about by the time you check all the numbers on it, a sub 40 grand electric hatchback. It's that car has, if you even include the subsidies, got price parity with a mid-spec Corolla. So that's definitely aggressive, and that's what's caused GWM to drop their prices. BYD is sticking with a field days promotion, I suspect longer than they plan to because of it. It's certainly an interesting time in the EV space. A quick comment before we go. Phil Haynes, I think the Tesla price changes and new model launches are no different to any other brand, other than the future is more unknown than for a brand that has been around for 20, 30, 50 years. It's also only really speculators and really early adopters who really wanted them. If you bought it to keep, it's fine. It'll average out a bit, and it was a long-term decision. I agree with you, Phil, except for the fact that the Model 3 entry level is hitting 3 years old in New Zealand, which is when the first leases are going to roll over, and that becomes the issue.
Yes.
That's Anyway, right. Thank you again, guys, for coming. Bit of a longer one than usual, but which I thought was strange. I didn't think it was a big news week, but it seems it was. So don't forget that to keep an eye on AutoTalk.co.nz. We've got a magazine coming out very shortly with some really interesting stuff in it. We're also about to release the details for AutoTalk Live, where we will, of course, be. And I'm looking forward to having a nice, quiet weekend and getting over this little bit of a head cold I've got. Next Friday, I will be coming to you live, as I do every year, from Owakuni, where I'm on my yearly boys trip, the famous boys trip.
Yep.
I normally take an electric vehicle down, but this year I'm taking a Chevrolet Silverado ZR2.
Oh, you dirty man!
Don't tell my electric vehicle followers. So yes, that'll be fun. But we'll still be putting on a show. Hopefully you guys are both available. And we'll see you next week for another AutoTalk Weekly Wrap.
Cheers.